Bang bang bongo. And here we are, everybody.
Ooh,
Welcome, welcome, welcome. It's another episode of This Uncanny Earth. It's your good buddy Spider, your friendly, grouchy, grumpy spider guy, along with Steven the intern, hanging out over there, which is over
ooh.
there for me because my camera's mirrored. That's a joke that keeps on giving. And speaking of giving, um, I know for us in the United States, we're going to be having Thanksgiving soon. I think it's in a week and a few days, not quite a week and a half. No, I don't know. Maybe it's 2 weeks. Might be 2 weeks.
I'm
For
gonna
some
check my
reason,
phone.
I always have it stuck in my head that it's a particular day, that it's like the 25th, like Christmas is always the 25th of December, but I don't think so. I think it's the 28th
Okay, it's
because,
yeah, you're right. It's the 28th this year. I
and
just
what
found
clued
it.
me in is because Black Friday is the day after Thanksgiving, and of course it has to be on
No,
a Friday.
no. Black Friday is every single day of November now.
Nah.
I've been getting Black Friday advertisements and sales since November 1st.
And I kind of think it's better that way because if I still worked in retail, I think I would prefer that myself because
Yeah.
Black Friday the day was always a terrible waste of time most of the time. You'd get like a rush of people right off the bat, getting a bunch of
And
stuff.
nothing for hours.
Yeah, and then you'd get people later in the day trying to return all the crap that they bought because they found it was crap. So, um, but that was mostly my retail experience. I worked in sales, so of course I had to do that kind of thing.
I
But
worked at a grocery store for a little while. Very similar.
you know that you don't think this is a weird way to start the show, I know, but you don't think about the type of like bargains people expect on Black Friday in the weirdest of places. Like grocery stores, why are you going to expect Black Friday doorbuster stuff at a grocery store?
Candy.
I mean, I guess, but it's not even like Christmas yet. I mean, you got to buy Christmas candy that early and let it sit in your cupboard
Oh,
and get
Rob
stale
would
for
be
that
so
long.
upset if he saw us talking bad about Christmas.
Mm. But I mean, and other things like the other half of my household, she's working in a tire shop now. She's store manager at a tire shop, and
New
they
tires
have
for
Black
Christmas.
Friday deals on tires.
Uh-oh, we're in trouble.
Hey, I'm just speaking truth. I didn't say anything negative. I just said, you don't want stale candy on Christmas Day, do you? Well, then buy your candy later. But I mean, it's a weird.
I already bought my Christmas candy.
It's gonna be stale.
No,
You're gonna.
I'm already eating it though.
Oh
So,
well, then that doesn't count. That's just candy
yeah,
for every day.
exactly.
See,
It's just
that's what
like
I do.
Christmas
That's
trees.
that's my view on all holidays. I just do all of the holiday stuff
Yeah.
anytime I want throughout the year. If I want to
Yeah,
have like a roast dinner, I just have a roast dinner. If I want to have like
exactly.
cookies that
That's
are
the
like
way to live.
Christmas cookies, I have Christmas cookies. If I want a present, I buy a present.
Yes.
Unless of course I'm poor, like
Uh-oh.
now. But things are gonna be looking up very soon. Very soon. Anyway, um, what are we doing here? We're doing another fabulous episode of This Uncanny Earth. Those of you who were tuned
Mysteries.
in and noticed us just talking gibberish for the first like almost 10 minutes will know that Rob is not here, even though he is here, even though he could be here, because who
Yeah.
needs like 4 days to put on a presentation?
I take about
Anyway,
2 hours.
anyway, he takes his time because he wants to be right. I get
Yeah.
it. I've just given him a hard time about it anyway because it's
He wants to be
four
professional.
days.
He's
Could have
trying to
been
be
on the
professional.
show. Could have done the show. I'm just messing with him. It's all good. He needs to take the time to make sure it goes right.
Yeah.
If you're gonna be presenting, you want to make sure you got everything in order. You got to do your notes and everything. So I'm just giving him a hard time. I don't remember where that's at though. So since you're watching, make sure you put your where you're gonna be doing this in the chat there because I see you typing in the chat there. Make sure you put your presentation location. The presentation
I
location.
like
Put
it.
it in the chat, and so that people can there, okay?
We're gonna make a clip of that later.
So that people can go, because since I don't remember all the details, I want to make sure I prop that. But well, I guess we should talk about associated business. You had the latest episode of your show, what, this past Saturday?
Yes.
Yeah, what was I know what it's about because I saw it, but
Yeah.
tell the other people out there who are lazy and have not
We
seen it yet what it's
we
about.
we were talking about the Sudbrink phone calls, which were some very strange, mysterious phone calls that a man received from his brother who didn't make those phone calls.
So that's nice and vague
Yep.
enough to draw people in. So hopefully you've
Yeah.
hooked some people.
I already got
Look,
40 views on it. Not bad.
see, those are doing good.
Yeah.
Everybody out there who's like, "Oh, he got a new show." Yeah, he's got a new show and it's really popular, and you should all watch it. Okay, don't be sleeping on that.
There it is, Youngstown, Ohio.
Yeah, tune in.
That's where Rob's gonna be doing his presentation.
So, so we got that. We'll get into what we got going on in the near future with your next show and what I got going on at the end. We're gonna dive into the topic. This is a continuation of last week's topic. Well,
yeah, I
you
saw
got
it.
to. You haven't made it unless you've got people trolling on you.
Yeah.
And again, not to put too much of a tangent
Oh,
on it.
thank you, James.
Some of my shorts and things that I've made just to be dumb on YouTube
Yeah.
caused like all kinds of controversy and people like mad, like, "Ugh, you know what you're talking about," and I just leave them go
that's
because I
great.
mean, what are you gonna do? Argue with them? Who cares?
Yeah.
They're dumb
great.
things for people to watch, and if people want to be mad about them, people are gonna get mad about them. So
Yep.
you
They can
know
watch
that you're
it or
making
not
an
watch it.
impact.
Whatever.
You're making an impact if people are complaining because they clicked on it to watch it. So you got the
Yeah.
click, you got the
Yep.
view.
We got the important part.
So it doesn't matter if they like it or not.
They fuel us with their hatred.
So anyway, all right. Continuation of last week. We're doing
Yes.
doing mysteries throughout history, not necessarily all
We got
ancient mysteries.
Scruffian. I didn't even. Oh, there it is. I didn't even know we were streaming on Twitch tonight.
I'll tell you, I don't. When it's just us, I usually don't, and that's not to undercut Rob out there. It's
But just because
I
he's
always
not there
feel.
to
Yeah, I
do
don't
everything.
want to jump on somebody else's Twitch without their, them being in here to be on it.
Yeah.
But since he probably went in and fixed it, then I guess it's okay.
I can do that.
Since he's the boss, he can do things like that without asking. Meanwhile,
your cat wanted to say hi.
He wants to chew on his own butt, and so he's vigorously doing that. Mysteries. Last week we talked about a few things. We talked about the man from Torrid, which was supposedly solved, but it still left some questions. We talked about, you had a couple things that you talked about, and now I can't remember which those are with what you're going to talk about tonight. I've got everything kind of jumbled in my head. It's been a rough week, information-wise.
Yes.
For my brain. Remind everybody, what did you cover last week so I can make sure we're all on the same page?
I also forgot, to be honest with you.
We'll see. There we go. We're starting off strong tonight.
Yep. I know what I'm going to cover tonight.
Well, that's great because so do I, mostly. But let's dive right in. We've wasted enough time. The first thing I'm going to talk about is something that if Rob had been here, he could have talked about. Because it's one of the things that he'd be interested in. See what happens if you're not here. You don't get to talk about it. The Copper Scroll, which is one of the Dead Sea Scrolls. Have you ever heard about this, Stephen?
Yes, I have. Those are the ones that they found out in the, what was it, the Pacific Ocean?
Nope.
Or
no, the Dead Sea Scrolls were found in a cave near the Dead Sea, which is why they're called Dead Sea Scrolls.
I remembered the Dead Sea part.
And this is a specific one. This isn't like most of the Dead Sea Scrolls are are
I,
variations of the Bible. They're
I think we
taken from the
briefly mentioned
Bible.
them during the Ark of the Covenant episode.
Yeah, they're various parts of one of the earliest versions of the Bible that we have from that time frame. They were hidden in the cave when there were some purges from the Romans. At least that's what the idea is that we have from history. The copper scroll is different from most of these. Most of these were written on parchment or papyrus, but the copper scroll is written on metal. It's copper mixed with
Ooh.
about 1% tin. Um, but over time, the action of centuries, it's turned the metal into oxide, and then there's no actual copper left. All that's oxidized out, so they're very brittle. Um, they were two separate sections of what was originally a single scroll, about 7.9 feet, 2.4 meters in length, which is pretty. It's taller than me and probably half or most of you.
Yeah.
Um, and it's not a literary work like the other things. This is instead a list of treasure.
Ooh. It's
It's
the
a
One
list.
Piece.
It's a list of 64 places where various items of gold and silver are supposedly buried or hidden. Um, it's different from the other scrolls also in that its dialect of Hebrew is different than the others, and the forms of the letters and various things date to a slightly different part. So they think it might have been placed there at a different time, or at least written at a different time. It's been on display. You can actually go see it. You can go see it in Amman in the Jordan Museum, and it's been there since 2013. And they have a facsimile of it on display in London, um, or it was supposed to be as of 2014. Now, the thing about it is it says that there's an inventory of 64 locations, 63 of which are treasures of gold and silver, and they've been estimated based on the writing to be tons.
Oh, wow.
Not tons as in, oh, it's a ton of stuff, it's a lot, but tons
Literal
as in the
tons.
actual literal weight,
Yeah.
literal tons. Um, One single location described on the scroll describes 900 talents, which is a weight unit that they usually used for currency, 868,000 ounces of buried gold,
Oh,
which is a
wow.
lot of gold. Uh, Tithing vessels are listed along with other things. One of the scrolls mentions priestly vestments. Um, and they've got a few spots. They have a structure of general location, specific location, often with distance to dig, and what to find. So far, however, no one has been able to decipher it to a point where they've found any of the treasures. Um, One of the columns says, in the salt pit that is under the steps, 41 talents of silver. In the cave of the old washer's chamber on the third terrace, 65 ingots of gold. It reads almost like one of those things where if you're doing a side quest for like a
In a
collection
game? Yeah.
from like Assassin's Creed or something. Like
Yeah,
it's like,
like,
oh yeah,
they
you
just
found
give
a
you a
little
very vague description.
and you gotta go look around, or like
Yeah.
Skyrim or something, you go look around and you find the treasure.
Or, like,
Um
you get a photo that's, like, an extreme close-up.
Supposedly, from inferring from the text, a lot of it's supposed to be that the treasure was specifically stashed where the Romans of the time could not find it. Other people say that it's the treasure that was hidden during a period of time called the Second Revolt, and estimated. It was estimated in 1960, so there's a lot of inflation between then and now. That the total would top $1 million US. Now,
So now it would
based
be,
on
like, over $1 billion probably.
could be there's a lot to it,
Inflation
um,
is terrible.
but they've never found any of it. The
Oh,
current
wow.
theory about it is that it could have been from the second temple, and then it was relocated and it was found and then redistributed to be used
Yeah.
later. Another theory is that it was from the first temple, which would make it even older, but some of the text doesn't, the dates don't always line up for that. And in that case, it would have been long found and long burgled.
Maybe the Knights
Um,
Templar.
Another is that it could have belonged to the Qumran community where the scrolls were found, and the people obviously already knew, oh, yeah, we know where all those places are, and they went and found it and divvied up amongst themselves. Another theory is that the Babylonians found it. A lot of people were at war at the time and for many years after. It's a very war-ridden area of the world, as we know right now. There's a lot of stuff going on
Yeah.
with Iran and Israel and Palestine and all that other kind of stuff. And we're not going to touch on any of those things because that's a whole other
Can
outside
of
the scope.
worms.
But it's one of those mysteries from the ancient world that you find, oh, it's a treasure map, there's treasure, and then there's no indicators of where it actually is without knowing at the time where things were. And I think that's part of the problem. I feel like the landscape and the politics and everything that's changed over the times, that the clues aren't going to match up anymore
Yeah,
unless you
because so
have an
much has
exact.
changed.
Yeah, I think a lot of that was probably colloquial knowledge, local knowledge, things
Like,
that
for
people
example,
of
we
the
don't have
time would
kings
know.
anymore.
Yeah, and they would say, like, even some of the towns and cities where they say, oh yeah, it's up on a terrace here, whatever. A lot of that stuff has been destroyed and lost over the years, the ruins and things like that. So finding that to begin with is already going to be a pretty monumental task. But that is the currently unsolved mystery of the Copper Scroll, which again,
Is made
for
out
all
of
that had been
copper.
here, well, yeah, it was, and then it fell apart from the copper. But Rob could have had some insights on it if he'd
Uh-oh.
have been here, because that's
He
his
did have
area.
insights. He thinks the
Yeah, well, that
Babylonians took
doesn't
it.
that doesn't count. It doesn't count. I'm gonna bust on him probably this whole show just because I can.
Hey,
Um,
you're getting back at him for the Final Fantasy trolling.
oh yeah, well.
Yep. You
By
know
the
how he
way, I
did
don't
that
like
first?
4. I don't like 4. It can be your favorite all you want, but I don't like it. I'm just trying to finish it now. It's on the same level as 3 now. I go 1, 2, 3, and 4 even. That's my ranking from the first 4. Don't like it. Anyway, that's the first item that I have. What do you have for us, Stephen, on the mystery
All
beat?
right. So I actually initially saw this in American Horror Story, the TV show, and I forgot about it for a while. Like, I didn't really know what it was. I thought it was just something original they had created for the show. And then when we started doing mysteries, I looked into it, and it turned out it was a real thing. It's called the Villisca, Iowa Axe Murder House. And essentially what happened is it was like a long time ago, back when, everyone was still farming and there were farmsteads and all that. And basically what happened is the family, there were like 6 or 7 of them. The family overnight were brutally slain in their homes with an axe, like to the point where you couldn't even tell their faces apart anymore. And here's the problem though. Nobody heard anything overnight. They found the bodies the next morning. One of the neighbors was, she was like, hey, there's no smoke coming out of the chimney. It's like 7 o'clock in the morning. They should be up tending to the farm animals, getting the eggs from the chickens, taking care of the horses, all this stuff. And the horses were even starting to get upset that nobody had, come to let them out of the stable or whatever. So the neighbor decided to go knock on the door. No answer. So she actually had to call another family member off, from somewhere else to come let her into the house. And when they got there, they let her in, and they went in and they found all the bodies. But here's the problem is the coroner said after they did their little investigation, they said that all the bodies had been, the parents in particular, had been struck more than 30 times. And the swing of the axe was so strong that it actually went into the ceiling and damaged the ceiling where it had gone in when they were swinging it, and every single person all this was done, and none of them woke up. And the two parents were upstairs on the second floor in the back of the house, which means that whoever did this had to break in, but there were no signs of a break in, so they had to get in without breaking in. And they were able to sneak all the way upstairs to the back of the house without anyone else figuring out what was going on or where they were coming from. And like, how do you hit someone with an axe 30 times without the person next to them waking up? And they never were able to figure out what happened.
I feel like I saw something about this very, very recently, I think. I'm
Yeah.
gonna ask you, did they eventually charge a pastor?
Yes. They did.
Okay, this is what I
And
was
then,
thinking of then.
yeah. And then they were acquitted later on.
They I watched one of those ghost hunting shows or something like that. I don't usually watch a lot of TV myself, but other people in the household, when they watch things, I sit down and I watch sometimes. And I don't remember which team it was. I don't think it was the Zach Baggins team. It might have been, but I felt like it was a more serious group that was doing it. It might have, maybe it was the ghost hunter guys. I don't remember for sure, but I remember they talked about how there was a pastor who'd been passing through town who supposedly had stayed at the house at some point, like they'd invited him to stay or something like that, and he apparently confessed to it, but the evidence really didn't stack up to it.
Yeah. They said
But
that the
so
evidence didn't match up, so even though he confessed, the jury still was like, "No, we're not accepting that confession."
yeah, I guess he had a lot of mental illness and a lot of other
Mhm.
things, and so they couldn't trust his word. They wanted to put it on somebody, but they couldn't.
Yeah,
And
because they were trying to put it on a competing businessman as well.
I think they ended up calling it like a really brutal murder suicide in the
Yeah.
end, just because they had no other leads, and it's never really been solved. Supposedly, the house has a lot of activity there. Like if you go there with a ghost hunting team,
Yeah, they
supposedly
got
there's
a
a lot
whole
of
website where you can go book tours and stuff.
and it's supposed to be real vicious. Like I guess it's not just knocking in the night or unsavory feelings. It's if you stay there for lengths of time,
You will face the same experience.
things will get progressively worse. Like there'll be
Yeah.
pounding and like stuff thrown around and like not quite poltergeist activity, but strange enough things that are really enough to creep you out, and you'll feel like you're being grabbed or feel like you're being touched. And so it's a real interesting story. And you're right, it hasn't been definitively solved.
But to be fair about, about them not being able to solve it, this did happen in a small town back before they had DNA evidence or anything like that. And even if they did have DNA evidence, it wouldn't really have mattered much because they had over 100 people walking through and contaminating the crime scene, and they just didn't have enough officers to contain that many people.
Mhm. So and again, like I said, the pastor supposedly confessed and said something about how the devil took hold of him or something like that.
Yeah.
And I can't remember everything from the show. I wish I'd could refresh my memory
And
on
they
that.
had a whole season of American Horror Story about it as well, if anyone is interested in watching some more stuff on it.
Um, yeah. Anything else you want to tell us about that?
That's really all I got for that one.
Okay, I'm gonna move us on to the Somerton Man, otherwise known as the Body on Somerton Beach. Have you ever heard
Ooh.
about this one?
I don't think I know this one.
The Somerton Man is an unidentified man whose body was found December 1st, 1948, on the beach at Somerton Park, which is a suburb of Adelaide, South Australia. And there's some interesting stuff, and this is another thing that somebody could have talked about if they were
Uh-oh.
on the show, because it involves some Persian. Some Persian.
Some Persian rugs?
No, some Persian codes and Persian
Oh
books
no.
and some all kinds of interesting things. So I got a couple of different articles on it, and I'm going to try to pull up a good one. And I want to make sure I get through some of the ads here because some of these are ad crazy. But so in December 1948, they found the body, and it was a well-dressed guy. And there's pictures. There's pictures of it. Like you can see the guy's picture, his photograph.
Yeah.
He's in a suit with polished shoes and his head slumped against a wall. And he was dead. They thought that the cause of death maybe was heart failure or possibly poisoning, but there was no trace of poison found in the autopsy. And there wasn't any other sort of foul play or natural causes. He was just a dead man. Um, he didn't have a wallet. He didn't have any identification. All of the tags from his clothes were cut out, so you couldn't tell who stitched them, what country they were made in, what shop they were bought from. They took fingerprints. They were unidentifiable. They put the photo of the body in the papers, and nobody could identify him. 4 months after they found the body, they found a hidden pocket that was sewn on the inside of his trousers. Now think about that. 4 months, which means it had to have been stitched in a way that was really flush with the
And
fabric in the clothes.
why did they continue to study the clothes for that long?
Doesn't say. Somebody was real interested in the case, but they found the hidden pocket, and inside the pocket was a rolled up piece of paper from a rare book called the Rubaiyat. I think I'm saying that right. The Rubaiyat, which is actually,
Someone else would know how to pronounce it properly.
if they were here, let me pull up because I also have Wikipedia here to back this up. It's the final page from a copy of Rubaiyat of Omar Khayyam, which is a book written by a man named Omar Khayyam, a 12th century Persian poet. Which is interesting all on its own, because how something like that just randomly end up in somebody's pocket in Australia? Let me go back to
Must
the
have been
other
something
article.
pretty important poem.
It gets more interesting. It gets more interesting from there.
Roses are
Because
red, violets are blue. Mysteries are for me and you.
I'm just going to pretend you didn't do that. The
Oh,
paper
I'm getting fired.
was from the book, but it had the words "tamam shud" on it, which means in Persian, "it has ended."
Oh.
That's a curious phrase to find in the pocket of a dead guy.
Hmm.
They spent more time looking for the book, couldn't find it, so they buried him without identification. They took a cast of his face and they embalmed him to preserve him.
This would make a great movie.
8 months later, a man came into the police station. He said that just after the body was found, he found a copy of that book in the back of his car that he kept parked near Somerton Beach.
He did it.
He thought nothing of it until he read about the search in a newspaper article. Sure enough, the book had a part of the final page that was torn, and it matched the piece of paper that was found in the man's trousers. Inside the book were a phone number and some sort of strange code.
Ooh.
So things get really interesting.
They call it.
The phone number led the authorities to a woman named Jessica Thompson who lived nearby. During her interview, she was very evasive and even claimed she was going to faint when she saw the bust of the man, but denied knowing him. However, she said she did sell the book to a man named Alfred Boxall. Unfortunately, Alfred Boxall was still very much alive at the time and still had the copy of the Rubaiyat that Jessica had sold him. So it's a different copy of the book.
Okay.
The code that was found ended up being even more unhelpful, and as of today, it has yet to be cracked. Let me
Well,
go
I think
back
it's pretty
to
obvious that she was lying.
maybe, but they didn't have any other evidence to go on. They had nothing
Yeah.
to charge her with. Now, the death occurred at a time of heightened international tensions following the beginning of the Cold War. So
Ah,
there was a lot of international things going on. Um,
maybe he was a spy.
Now, to add to the mystery in a way that does it solve it or does it not, in July of 2022, a professor from the University of Adelaide, in association with a genealogist, concluded from DNA of the man's hair that the man was Carl Webb, nicknamed Charles, an electrical engineer and instrument maker born in 1905. That's all they could get. They couldn't get anything else. They couldn't get any family. They couldn't get any other details about him. South Australia Police and Forensic Science South Australia did not verify the result. So it's still up in the air if that's accurate,
Even true.
although they were hopeful of being able to do so. Um, what they and a few times over the air they've talked about it. And in 1994, the Chief Justice of Victoria and Chairman of the Victorian Institute of Forensic Medicine reviewed the case to determine the cause of death and concluded that there seems little doubt it was digitalis. He says. Um, I'm going to look up what that is in a minute. He supported his conclusion by pointing out that the organs were engorged, consistent with digitalis, the lack of evidence of natural disease, and the absence of anything seen macroscopically which could account for the death. Now, digitalis is a type of poisoning that occurs in people who take too much of the medication digoxin or eat plants such as foxglove that contain a similar substance. Symptoms are typically
Hmm.
vague. They may include vomiting, loss of appetite, confusion, blurred vision, changes in color perception, and decreased energy. Potential complications include an irregular heartbeat, which can be either too fast or too slow, which could deal to a heart attack, which could lead to death. So that's interesting as well because it says that toxicity may occur over a short period of time following an overdose or gradually during long term treatment. And risk factors include low potassium, low magnesium, and high calcium. It's a medication used often for heart failure or for atrial fibrillation. So it could have been that something that he was taking for a heart condition and then he took too much.
Maybe he was a patient in a nearby hospital and something went wrong and they were worried about getting caught, so they just dumped the body.
That's possible. And somebody wanted to make, if somebody was smart enough, if
They
somebody was
could,
a doctor, they
yeah,
would know how they could be traced. So they cut the tags out. They took
get
all of
rid
his
of the
identification.
fingerprints,
hmm
messed up the fingerprints somehow.
So, yeah, so there are a lot of interesting wrinkles to the case. The case, despite the fact that they believe with the DNA testing that they know who he is, it does not say that they've been able to actually solve exactly how he died, if this was the case, or why he was where he was, or why he had the copy of the book, or what the significance of the phrase "it is finished" in Persian has to the man's death.
Sounds like he got involved with some bad people.
Could be. It could be. Whatever it is, though, is pretty. It does sound like it would make a good book or a good movie,
Yeah.
a good mystery thing, like one of those. Um, the guy who wrote the
Neil Gaiman, American Gods?
no, not him. Somebody Brown, not David Brown, not what's his name? The guy who wrote the. They made movies with Tom Hanks in them eventually about the. Oh man, I can't even
Ah,
remember what it's about the lost gospel of Thomas or something like that. I think one of them was about
okay.
Dan Brown. Dan
Ah,
Brown. That's what the Da Vinci Code. Da Vinci
ah,
Code.
okay.
Something like that. It sounds something like that
Yeah.
kind of intrigue level, one of those sort of books. And I don't know why it took so long for that to get through my brain there. I told you it's been a week. Um in a series of weeks. It's been weeks and weeks and weeks. Uh, so yeah, that is the man from the body of Somerton Beach, otherwise known as a Somerton Man. Um, so what do you got next? What's next on deck here?
All right. One of my favorites, Antarctica. Where did all the ice on Antarctica come from when it only gets 6 inches of rain a year? It is as dry as the Sahara Desert. Where did all that ice come from? That's what I want to know. Where did all the ice come from if it only rains 6 inches a year and it's freezing cold and dry like the Sahara Desert? And also, why can we form peace treaties with all the different countries and continents all across the world? Why can all these different nations be peaceful only on Antarctica? What is down there? That's what I want to know. I want to know what is on Antarctica that they are being so protective over. What is it that they can all agree on and all be peaceful about? That's my own personal question that I want to find.
If I was going to put forth at least a theory to part of that, I would say that probably most of the water comes from the surrounding oceans flowing to that part of the planet
Ah.
during the natural orbit, I
So
would
not
think.
necessarily rainfall, but from the oceans around it.
Yeah, I think because
That would make sense.
the classic phrase is nature abhors a vacuum.
Yeah.
And so if you have an empty space and there's a way for water to get to it,
But
water is going to
still,
get to it.
it's 90% of the world's water is on Antarctica. And it's like 6 feet deep, the ice sheets.
The other thing to consider, I think, is because remember, not like the entire landscape of the continents and
Ooh,
everything
the gate to hell.
were different in prehistory
Yeah.
than they are now. And
The
wherever the
impact.
water was is different than where it all is now in
Yeah.
relation to being blocked off by different land masses and things
I
of that
think it's
nature.
Atlantis.
That's also a possibility. Or they also
Yeah.
called it, there were references to a land called Hyperborea.
Oh, yeah, I think I remember us talking about
Hyperborea
that.
was supposed to be in Antarctica. Um, but
Ooh, James has a theory as well.
James, if you would be so kind, send an email. The email's ticking across the screen. You always see it. Send an email with everything you think about it, and if Rob is down for it, we'll bring it up at the next show. As long as you don't mind us discussing it. That way, you don't have to type and type in the chat here. You
Yeah.
can take your time and put your thoughts down for it, and we'll
We would love to
peruse it.
hear it.
Yeah, we'll peruse it for you because that would be a good engagement, I think. But I as far as the ice itself, I think that and that kind of jives with if there was a prehistoric civilization,
Yeah.
and
What
then
happened to
we
them?
right, because eventually all that water, once the climate changed and the way the orbit might have changed and things over the years, all of that was starting to freeze and they might have gotten pushed out of their own land. And that's something that I just thought of, and that the whole thing of Atlantis might be an allegory for not necessarily being sunk under the water in a
But on
significantly short
water
period of
with
time.
amazing irrigation systems, like a port
Maybe
city.
because ice is water,
Yeah.
it sank into the water, but instead, over hundreds of years, was instead encased by the
Yeah.
ice as the ice sheet built itself
I've
up.
actually been wondering if it might be a mistranslation, and all this time we're thinking it's an underwater city when it's an on water city. Like a beachside city or something like that.
Well, that's one of the things too that they've looked into over the years. They've said that there was not really a race necessarily, but a conglomeration of tribal peoples called the Sea Peoples, who roamed up and down the coasts, and they were almost like pirates, but not. They had their own.
Ah. Like mer
Um,
people almost?
No, they weren't like creatures. They were
Okay.
they were people, but they
Okay.
were called the Sea Peoples because they were an alliance of different groups that were all seafaring,
Ah.
and they would all trade with and sometimes attack and the various coastal civilizations like Greece
Mm.
and
Like
and
Vikings almost.
kind of, but not quite so martial. They were more
Okay.
willing to trade with people, I guess. They were slightly more enlightened, I guess you
Ah.
could say, at the times what the outlook was.
Yeah.
But one of the theories is that the Sea Peoples were either descendants of or like the outer ring of the Atlantean civilization. One of the theories is that if you see them as remnants, is that after Atlantis fell, they were kind of nomadic on the sea, and so they went and did raids and they went and did deals with people, and then they slowly integrated with other societies, and they eventually went away because they were almost the Sea People were had one of the best navies of the time, and it wasn't really like a they didn't have fleets necessarily of all the same kind of ships and things like that. They just had they could bring a bunch of seafaring vessels all together in a short period of time to go do what they needed to do.
Yeah.
And so the idea that they came from a place that had been a waterborne civilization is a good lead in to them possibly being left over from Atlantis after that fell, or they could have been a part of that and just on the outer edges of that civilization, whereas the innermost people would stay on the Atlantean landmass, wherever that might have been. But the farther out you go, you have more nomadic sea arms of the civilization going out and working with trades with the
Yeah.
outside world and
You always
contact
got
and
to
all
have
that.
people exploring.
And then when everything went the way it did, then they
Yeah.
again assimilated with the other.
And Rob said they traded with Egypt.
Mhm. The Sea Peoples are pretty well documented. You can actually look that up, and you'll find a lot of historical talk about them. They're mentioned in a lot of ancient literature. They were well known at the time,
Ah, okay.
um, so it's not like they were particularly a mystery of their own right.
Yeah.
Um, but they eventually, like I said, they faded over time and integrated with the other coastal civilizations.
Arabs talk about them as
Mhm.
well, Rob says.
Yep. Yeah, they were pretty well known. Like I said, they went far and wide. Some people think they were Phoenician also, but there's no way for sure to know because they were mentioned a lot, but there's no like, and this is where exactly they lived, and this is where they went, and when they weren't on the sea, and this is, there wasn't a sea people, quote unquote, main city that people could go and attack them or
Yeah.
whatever. They didn't do things
They
like
were
that. You
nomadic,
always,
is what you're saying.
as far as everyone else saw them as, yeah. And no one else at the time was that good of a seafarer, um, to be able to go and find it without running into them and being told, no, you got to turn back. So you had all that. What else you got on that? Is there anything else you want to talk about Antarctica?
Yes. Well, not Antarctica so much, but Rob mentioned Egypt, and that got me thinking. Another really great mystery, just from ancient civilizations in general, is how did they build the pyramids? Because those stones weighed like 1 ton each, like if I'm not mistaken. And one of my favorite theories is back when we were talking about our frequency episode, back from that one, some people believe they may have actually been able to use frequencies in order to move the stones. And I thought that was a really interesting one.
Anti-gravity is a pretty common theory. Um,
Yeah, like with UFOs as well.
yeah, because we can do some very mild, very low level like experiments with anti-gravity things, usually with like super lightweight objects in certain fields. So we know that it's possible using magnetics to basically create some form of almost anti-gravity. But for something
Yeah,
that weighs that much, that's a whole different story. Um, I don't think that's ever going to be something that's going to be definitively solved because
definitely not. Like what happened to Tesla?
you have the Egyptian antiquities authorities who don't want anything really to differ from this what they've decided.
Yeah,
And
I've heard you talking about them before.
what
They're
they've
very
decided
strict.
is how they rolled the stones on the logs and the various things like that.
Ah,
And I think that's the with like slave labor and that sort of thing.
yeah.
I
That's what they're going
believe,
with.
yeah, I believe that's what they've decided is the 100%. That's the fact. Which, I on the one hand, as I've said before, you can't really blame them for trying to protect their heritage and their history,
Yeah.
but you can also be a little grouchy with the fact that they don't want to consider any other
Alternative.
alternatives to what might not be the absolute truth, because we
Yeah.
just don't know, in the interests of just preserving their historical whatever, because this is almost something that's of human heritage importance
Yeah.
rather than just national pride, but they don't see it that way. And I can understand that.
Because the mystery affects everybody at this point.
A lot of the nations over there are very particular about their own sovereignty and preserving their place in both the ancient and modern world, and preserving their lineage.
They're not the only ones with pyramids.
That's kind of why we have the issue, without getting into any of the ins and outs of the politics, because that would get us shut down and argued with by a
Oh,
lot of
I was
people.
just thinking about the pyramids in Antarctica.
But I'm mentioning the fact that we have
Yeah.
trouble with the whole Israel-Palestine situation, because
Yeah.
they both have their own. This is the history as we know it. Well, this is the history as we know it, and all of us outside are only seeing the most modern form of that. We're not seeing what they considered their past history, because we weren't there for it. Here in the US, we weren't even a country yet at the time, when most of their early boundaries and most of their civilizations were all doing what they were doing. So there's no way to say really
Who's right?
who's a legitimate state and who's not, other than
Mhm.
going by the word of everybody that's over there. And that's how a lot of the Middle East is. They all have, this is our history and this is how it is, but their neighbor might be like, no, your history was crap because we were there, and our history is this, and this is how it is. And the third country over here says, you're
Patriotism in a
both full of
nutshell.
it
And I'll
because
just leave
we
it at
fought
that.
all of you in the ancient past and you were both garbage and this is how
Yeah.
it is. And
It
you
reminds
throw
me
in
of that episode of SpongeBob where Patrick wanted to stay dirty and SpongeBob wanted to clean everybody.
and you throw in the religious aspect to it and all that kind of thing, and it
Yeah,
gets really
I was trying
complicated.
not to
So,
go there, but yeah.
well, that's as far as we're getting into it. We're not getting
Yeah.
into it any further than that, but that's just an example of why it's difficult with Egypt specifically to really go along with, or to really try to dig deeper into some of the things like the
Yeah.
Sphinx. They've said definitively, even the antiquities authorities have admitted that yes, there is a cavity under the Sphinx. But
For
for
what?
on the Egyptian side, they say, oh well, it's for nothing. It's just an empty space that was probably used for storage when they were building it. There's nothing in there.
Ah, I don't
You
believe
don't
that.
know. And if anybody says, well, can we check? No, because we don't want you to damage it. Well, yeah, that makes sense. That
So
does make
convenient.
sense, but
Real convenient.
there's no way to know until you go in and look. But
It's
nope, you can't.
Schrodinger's temple. Schrodinger's Sphinx.
And because you can't go look, then they get to decide what the story is, and that's what they've
Rob said
decided
there were
on.
2 Sphinxes.
That's another thing too, that there were two, and they were like gateways, like a gateway almost, or a path between them, that kind of thing. And then there's the other mystery of the fact that in every one of the major pyramids, there has never actually been a ruler buried. They've all been buried in the Valley of the Kings.
Oh, that defeats the whole purpose.
So why are they tombs if they've never actually held a body?
They're
It's a good
not
question.
tombs.
And if they weren't tombs, what were they? But
Yep.
Egypt says no, they were tombs. Grave
Batteries.
robbers. Grave robbers. They were tombs. And there's even things in the pyramids that they don't, that are cavities and things. Like we've all seen those specials where they've put the robots through the
Ah.
shafts and all that other kind of stuff.
Rob dropping knowledge when he's not even here. The pharaohs were
Well,
also
he
part of
should
the
have been
mystery
here to
school.
say so. Just slacking. Just
Yeah.
slacking. Um, so yeah, I mean there's even things in the pyramids that we can't access any further because you can't do anything else because you'll damage it.
His eyes
Okay,
and
but
brain are busy.
how do you find out what's in there? Well, I guess you don't. We believe they were for this and they were air shafts, so you just got to believe us.
Yep.
And it's like, okay, that's what you want to go with.
Don't ask me to believe you when I don't even know if the sky is blue. I'm like, is the sky actually blue, or do I just believe it's blue because that's what everyone told me?
Um, it's difficult for a lot of this stuff for anybody who's an evidence-based researcher.
Yeah.
Like I never take a story flat out as absolute, like, oh yeah, that's what happened, great, without having like, oh, but we also found this which backs up my story, and we found this and we found this. Oh, that's actually pretty compelling. That's cool. If I just have
Ooh,
somebody tell me, yeah, well, this happened and this is it.
brain in a bad idea.
Um, it's just difficult, like I said, for anything to be proven or disproven if you don't allow the evidence
To be examined.
to come forward in some way. But then you'll also have people who say, well, the evidence can be faked and there's this and there's that. That's true. But, and that's kind of taking place in, I don't think it's Mexico. I think it's in, which country is it? There's a South American country where they found the mummies, where they say that they're alien mummies.
Oh, wow.
Um, and they're actually going through the steps of like
Yes.
taking samples
Lighthouse.
and doing that kind of stuff. And
Lighthouse is
Peru,
100% accurate.
Peru, Peru. They're I think there was a declaration saying that yes, we believe these are real and these are now national treasures or something like that. But there's nobody from the outside looking in. It's just various arms of the Peruvian government and the Peruvian whatever their science people are, if they have a separate division of that or if it's all part of the government. So there's no consensus on it yet. It's very interesting. I think they're fake, or at least I don't think they necessarily were made to be fake. I just don't think they are what they think they are. But I'm willing to be wrong if
Not
the evidence
fake,
comes
but
out.
misunderstood.
If the evidence comes out that they are something that's unheard of on this planet, then in
China
China,
pyramids?
big giant mounds that they put grass
Oh.
on and dirt on, and they want to make it look like, oh, these are just
Oh,
natural mountains, but they're
I've heard
basically
about
pyramids.
those. I didn't know they were in China. I've heard about them though.
China, there's evidence now that could show that that's a valid theory against China because
Uh-oh.
there's a popular tourist area in China. I saw a story on this very recently where they have this big boulder on one of their tallest mountains where people can go up and they can go stand there and they can sit on this
Thank you,
rock.
James.
It was supposed to be like their biggest tourist attraction. They closed it off for a while to do cleaning and maintenance on the grounds nearby, but some people were still allowed to go visit the area. They just weren't allowed to go, poke around at the construction spot. And they found out that the giant boulder up there, the big tourist thing, is a fake boulder. It's a thin
Oh,
material that looks like a
what?
boulder on the outside, and it's got brick columns on the inside,
Oh
modern
no.
bricks. The
No.
Chinese government made it and told everybody, oh, yes, look at this natural wonder of our country to bring tourism in at the top of this mountain, and people are sitting on it and everything. And it's a fake boulder made with bricks.
Oh no.
So if they're going to do that, what are they going to do with their pyramids?
Or bury forest over top of them, apparently, according to Rob.
Yeah, they wanted to cover them up. They wanted to cover them up, and nobody's allowed to go see it. Nobody's. You can go there, but you're not allowed to go investigate. You're not allowed to go digging. You're not allowed to
Yeah.
go excavating. You're not allowed to check it out under any
You may
circumstances.
looky, but no touchy.
So, um, well, that's all for that. Any closing thoughts? Anything you want to say before we start wrapping up here?
It is a very uncanny world filled with many mysteries, and someone may know the answer, but they're not telling us what the answer is.
I think all things come out in time eventually. You
Yeah,
just have to do enough digging and get enough people to actually
care.
follow the trail to get there. Um,
Thank
for
you,
the
James.
future, what do you have coming up for your next episode of your show?
Well, I was going to look into this mysterious song that apparently everyone knows, but that didn't work too well. So I think I might switch it up and do some Mandela effects.
There's a lot of
Just
them.
some random Mandela effects and discuss them maybe.
There's a lot of them. Um, are you doing any sort of any game streams, anything like that coming up?
Not right now. I'm trying to wait until I get my own house before I get back to streaming.
Fair enough. Um, I have my usual nightly game stream every night, generally between. It's actually been earlier than usual
10?
because our schedules are different now
Oh,
with the new job and everything. So
usually about now, wouldn't it be?
yeah, now actually, most days I start sometimes right after 10 o'clock. So it's
Yeah.
anytime between 10 and midnight is usually when I start. So if anybody wants to watch that, twitch.tv/DMGRGN. All of those end up on my separate YouTube channel if you want to go watch there instead, which is Spider Does Things on YouTube. All of my reviews, all of my tasting videos, a few videos with the guy who just said he
Food
didn't want to come to
reviews.
work today. Um, and
I like the food
everything else is
reviews.
there. So I'm starting to do more of those. I just have to be able to afford to eat fast food more
Yeah.
often. But
Sonic has some new slushes right now if you want to check those out.
I think we have a Sonic around here. Maybe
Yeah, I got
I'll have to look.
a butter beer tonight. It was good.
I have to watch what I pick because I know
Yeah.
sometimes I'll pick things that have like a slice of cheese on them, but I can't go like I
Uh-oh.
can't have a milkshake.
Yeah.
I can't have that kind of stuff. Or if like, oh, we're doing cheesecake
Ooh,
month, I can't do
actually,
cheesecake month.
real ending thing for you personally. I am very proud of myself. It took me many months, but I have overcome my lactose intolerance. I was able to drink a milkshake the other day, a whole milkshake with no issues. I'm very proud of myself. Over many months, I ingested lactose and suffered the consequences, and I built up my tolerance.
Well, for some people it comes and goes, but
Yeah.
I like to drink, and drinking and
Uh-oh.
lactose don't go together because then
Oh
you puke a
no.
lot.
I
So I
remember
had to
that.
make my choice. Do I want to
Yep.
drink or do I want to eat cheese? And I said, well, I like to
I
drink.
remember the
So,
story Rob told about that sandwich.
so
Yep.
that's all we got. Tune in next week. We should all be here, probably,
Possibly.
and we'll figure out what we're doing then. So, as for me, as for Steven, as for everybody, we're leaving.
Thank you, Lighthouse. See ya.